This is a summary of the existing conditions at Hollister Ranch for the Hollister Ranch Coastal Access Program, or HRCAP. A discussion of opportunities and constraints for beach access will also be included and will come after the existing conditions. Data for existing conditions comes from multiple sources. State Lands Commission collected high-resolution aerial imagery and elevation data as part of a mean high tide line survey in the winter of 2018 and 2019. The video playing to the right is part of the data collected in this effort. Data for streams, critical habitat, slope, and soil characteristics come from federal agencies like the U.S. Geological Survey, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Information on tide elevations is from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. An analysis of beach access related to tide levels is provided here is from field visits by the HRCAP consultant team in February of 2020. This summary is an initial understanding of the existing conditions at Hollister Ranch. Still to be included in later project phases are locations for cattle operations, approximate locations of cultural resource sensitivity, and a complete biological survey. Hollister Ranch is an approximately 14,000 acre private ranch on the coast of Santa Barbara County. The ranch lies entirely in the coastal zone, which is the jurisdiction of the California Coastal Commission and is outlined on this map in red. The ranch is bordered by Gaviota State Park on the east and the Dangerman Preserve to the west, which is managed by the Nature Conservancy. The rail line runs along the coast of Hollister Ranch, which has a right-of-way that varies in width from approximately 100 to 400 feet. There are roughly 8.5 miles of Hollister Ranch coastline with 6 named access points to public beaches. These access points are Agua Caliente, Alegria, Secate, Drake's, El Bolito, and San Agustin. These access points all roughly align with the drainage points of streams. Public beaches adjacent to Hollister Ranch are only accessible over land via private road with permission from the Hollister Ranch Owners Association. Access via Hollister Ranch Road is managed at a manned gatehouse approximately half a mile along Hollister Ranch Road from the eastern boundary of the ranch. The length of Hollister Ranch Road within the ranch is 11 miles. With a posted speed limit of 25 miles per hour. Traveling at the speed limit, it takes approximately 26.5 minutes to travel from the eastern ranch boundary to the western ranch boundary. Beach access points are accessible off of Hollister Ranch Road via short roads that can be steep, windy, narrow, and often unpaved. Hollister Ranch Road does not cross the rail line, but these short roads do cross the rail line en route to Secate, Drake's, El Bolito, and San Agustin beach access points. Access by foot along the shore from Gaviota State Park is highly dependent on tides and swell, and field visits were timed to examine shoreline access at key tide elevations. The diagram on the left panel illustrates the tide elevations at Gaviota State Park, which are expressed in feet above zero elevation. Tide elevations, such as mean sea level and mean high tide, are based on measurements taken over a 19-year period called the National Tidal Datum Epoch. Mean sea level at Gaviota State Park is a tide elevation of 2.66 feet and can be thought of as the average tide over the course of a year. Mean high tide, which is also called mean high water, at Gaviota State Park is 4.46 feet and is the legal boundary between state tidelands and private land. However, any spatial location and mapped representation of tide levels are considered to be ambulatory. That is, they vary in space and time depending on the level of sand on the beach. Therefore, the mean high tide line surveyed by the State Lands Commission and displayed here is for reference only and does not determine beach access. However, observations at key tide levels like mean high tide and mean sea level are key to understanding the existing barriers of shoreline access from Gaviota State Park to public beaches adjacent to Hollister Ranch. Field visits to examine shoreline access were timed to coincide with mean sea level and mean high tide in February 2020. Wave size at Gaviota State Park for these visits was in the 1 to 3 foot range. This map displays barriers to linear beach travel that were experienced as part of these field visits. Red lines are sections of coast that are impassable at mean sea level and mean high tide or at mean high surf conditions. Orange represents sections of coast that are impassable at mean sea level or at high surf conditions. This data was only captured from Gaviota State Park to the beach at Agua Caliente. It does not represent the full range of barriers caused by tide and waves, but captures the major barriers to linear beach travel to public beaches adjacent to Hollister Ranch from existing public access at Gaviota State Park. East of Hollister Ranch boundaries, there are informal social trails from turnouts along Hollister Ranch Road that lead to dangerous cliff descents to the beach, some assisted by a rope. These trails are not formally recognized, are not safe, and do not gain access to Hollister Ranch beaches outside of restricted tide elevations. The geophysical environment of the Hollister Ranch coastline is dominated by steep slopes, particularly in the eastern third of the property. Beach access points at Agua Caliente and Alegria are adjacent to a stream at the end of a short, shallow canyon. Steep and varied topography is present in the western 2/3 of the ranch, but western beach access points are not as defined by topography as at Agua Caliente and Alegria. Coastal bluffs along the coast at and between all beach access points present a safety hazard as they are steep, unstable, and are not traversable by foot. Here are the short, shallow canyons at Alegria and Agua Caliente. They define the beach access at these locations. Erodible soils are characteristic of most areas of Hollister Ranch. Areas of high soil erodibility along the coast are particularly susceptible to erosion from natural causes such as wind or rain, or from human activity. High soil erodibility is considered a constraint to development, but can be effectively managed through conscientious engineering and design. Hollister Ranch has areas that are designated as critical habitat for threatened and endangered species by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. These species are the tidewater goby, the California red-legged frog, the Gaviota tar plant, and the lompoc yerba buena. The species that have designated critical habitat near beach access points are the tidewater goby, which has critical habitat in streams, and the Gaviota tar plant, which has critical habitat along coastal bluffs and in foothills. Vegetation mapping has been done utilizing high-resolution aerial imagery for a narrow swath of land along Hollister Ranch Road from Gaviota State Park to the Secate Beach access point. Biologists have mapped the extent of sensitive native species like coastal sage scrub, oak woodland, and riparian scrub, as well as non-native species like eucalyptus. There are small eucalyptus groves scattered along the coast, non-native species, primarily the area, coastal sage scrub, and a mix of coastal sage scrub with grassland, and small pockets of oak woodland. This fire threat data set from the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection is a combination of two factors: fire frequency, or the likelihood of a given area burning, and the potential fire behavior or fire hazard. These two factors are combined to create four threat classes ranging from moderate to extreme. Much of the coastline of Hollister Ranch is in the moderate and high fire threat categories, with areas near Agua Caliente and Secate beach access points rated as having very high fire threat. Land use at Hollister Ranch was mapped in very general categories to include developed land such as large structures, homes, or community buildings, disturbed land that includes agriculture and small structures, and undisturbed land which has no development but is utilized as rangeland. Though the mapping scale and categories of land use in this data are coarse and general, they are sufficient and appropriate for the goal of understanding the general location of development relative to potential access components. Coastal features at each beach access point have been discussed in general in the sections above. These include the steep coastal bluffs and the mean high tide line. To further understand the constrained beach environment, the fragments of seawall that were built in the early 1900s were mapped. Coastal bluffs, mean high tide line, and the seawall are shown here as coastal features that help define opportunities and constraints for coastal experiences, accessibility, and capacity. Gray line represents seawall. Dotted blue line is the mean high tide line. Steep slopes are in pink. The bluff top and bluff bottom are in lighter pink, solid and dashed. These are coastal features at Alegria, characterized by steep bluffs and seawall, mean high tide line. Secate has a larger break in steep bluffs. The coastal bluffs does not have a seawall for some distance around it. Also has a wide sandy beach. Drake's, similar to Secate, has a wider break in the coastal bluffs, a wider beach, and no seawall directly adjacent to the beach. To give the view of Secate and Drake's, El Bolito does have coastal bluffs along the entire access point. These are smaller coastal bluffs that get larger with some distance away from the access points. There also is no seawall along this stretch of beach. As I've been clicking through these beach access points, you can notice how the mean high tide line moves up and down the coast in a north to south fashion. This is for visualization only. This changes on a daily basis as the sand levels of the beach change. San Agustin is again similar to El Bolito. Does have a break in the coastal bluffs. Has no seawall. And the coastal bluffs are smaller near the access points. To give a view of San Agustin and El Bolito.